I want to ping it over to Sarah with the library. I know we talked about some library funding, so I wanted to have her be able to talk to the Finance Committee to discuss their potential projects and get some feedback as we move forward with that part of the ARPA spending. As you all know, we're trying to get quotes out by the end of the month to make sure that we satisfy our ARPA obligation requirements so that we don't have to give money back to the feds on this part. So I'll hand it over to Sarah.
Yeah, so very brief update. We think we'll be able to get 2 quotes for a new, the best project ever off of our list, a new sewage grinder and a drain in the women's restroom, which the cost estimator has already given us an estimate, and they think it'll be $76,000. The library is more than happy to make up that $3,000 so we don't have raw sewage exploding in our storage room ever again.
Great.
Good work.
Yeah, so we should have, they've said they can get us the invoice by next week at some point.
And if I may, that's part of your critical list that you gave last week?
I actually think that was on the priority 1 to complete within 1 year. Or was that,
Okay.
yeah, priority 1. But this is something, those that were on the critical list were only code violations. Apparently exploding sewage in public spaces is not a code violation. So it's on priority 1.
Great.
Yep, so that's it.
That's all you gotta say about that?
No, I told Edmund, he was thrilled. So if we can make Edmund happy, that is my #1 goal in life. Yeah.
Mine too.
I have a finance question, if I may, for the library. It seems that we have plenty of company or city vehicles all over the place. What is the library, what does Edmund, the maintenance man, if you will, what does he use for a vehicle?
His truck,
Does he get compensated for miles or anything?
no.
He just does it out of his heart?
Yes. This is a conversation we've had quite a few times because I was very concerned when I started here. And he doesn't want to track it. Last year I did for a little while and gave him a reimbursement for mileage because we didn't end up going to the state library conference, so we had that budget left, so I gave it to him and I tracked his miles for a couple months and that did it for the, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been a discussion.
With all these new vehicles around town and leased vehicles and all that, is there another?
I think he just doesn't want to bother.
Right,
It's
doesn't want to mess
easier
with,
for
okay,
him.
okay.
Yeah.
I'm
Thank
just
you-
wondering if there's
thank you for
something
thinking
at
of
Public
him.
Works that could be left at the library that's
No,
not. get-
I've had a very nice offer from, who was it? It was Reggie. Yes, Reggie offered Edmund a truck at one point and Edmund turned him down.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
So I'll make sure Edmund is taken care of.
Okay.
But thank you for thinking of him. That's
Thanks.
very kind.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you all.
2 of my other updates are one on the kind of budget process. We've been meeting with Nate and Ashley this week, so we're requests are into all of the management staff to get their budgets into this accounting system by January 31st. We've also got a 10% cut exercise off of that to come to me during the follow-up meetings with management heads on, what would a 10% cut in your department look like if you were trying to minimize disruptions of services as much as possible, just so we can kind of see where there might be additional. I know last time when I came in fairly late into the budget process and starting over, I felt, that it was difficult to get, for me to be on the cutting side of somebody else's held budget. So I'd rather have them sort of generate their own cut ideas if they, were had to, if it was, just so we know going into this. I know with the tax increases over the last couple of years, and we do have collective bargaining increases that are, legally we can't do anything about those, and inflation and other things, but I really want to have a good sense on if we are trying to cut spending, how do we do it the minimum impact, and to know those tools going into the budget season. So that is proceeding apace. Maura wasn't able to show up today. She's not feeling great, but we're going to do like a website we have some options on refreshing our website and increasing kind of our communications there. There's a more expensive option and a much cheaper option. I think we're going to be going with the cheaper one. It gets you 90% of the way there, but she's got a great presentation that we'll reschedule to January. Also had a good conversation with Jackson Labs this week. They have a voluntary contribution. They don't call it a pilot. It's a voluntary contribution for us. So, but, had a broader conversation about the economic benefit. I mean, it's an amazing facility. I didn't realize there's $250 million they put into that Lowe's to turn it into what it is. It is a phenomenal facility, and even though they're not paying taxes, I know they're employing, seems like great jobs. And it's nice to have an employer base too that's not just so heavily on the retail, but into that category. So really impressed with all the work they did, but they had some statistics that I thought were really interesting on general economic impact of what they do out there. So I might look to have a future finance committee meeting to have their government affairs person come here just to kind of answer questions about Jack's economic impacts, things you have. It also got me thinking, I know Steve, on what I thought was a great idea on, there is a cost to that as well, though, and being, I think I just pulled those numbers because of the Myrick Street thing we talked about. I think it was like a couple $100,000 a year when that Lowe's was there, was, tax revenue coming into the city. So it is, having all those figures, and knowing what the cost of that is, but also the cost of nonprofits, as you mentioned, Steve, on, maybe having, here's the value of your land and this is essentially what the city contribution is to have that in Ellsworth as a service center, which is great, but because we house so many nonprofits and other things, there is a loss of tax revenue for us as well, and having those figures and maybe sending that out to folks just so if they wanted to also, like Jack's, do a voluntary contribution, that was there, but also just for the city council to know when we start talking about funding nonprofits, et cetera, in the next cycle, as part of that process, that we know, what the city's already providing in terms of essentially tax relief on that as well. Last thing is Bray Avenue. You probably saw some of the news reports on this. There was a little confusion, I think, in council on whether we had a workshop and didn't. It wasn't a public workshop. It was in this room, and I think the press were invited to it. So I was happy to have the press there, but it wasn't like an official. We were really trying to work with our public works team in that group to figure out options still before I potentially went to council. We're getting closer to we've looked into the abandoned road aspect, a lot of the history. Former city manager reached out, actually, that was a part of that process. The last time they thought about making Bray a public road, and former city council decided not to do that, as was mentioned in that article. There is a current water leak there. We've contacted the PUC, our water department can't be involved in fixing it. That was confirmed. I don't believe the abandoned road avenue is going to be available to us. There is an option where the city could have our highway department and our wastewater team to help fix the leak in the near term, just to stop that from becoming a much worse issue if it was to be frozen over. But the key is precedent, right? Which is if we fix a private road for this, it is a very unique circumstance close to the downtown. For a lot of reasons. I think it makes a lot of sense, but also I don't want to set a precedent that we do this over and over again for all types of areas. So I want to make sure with our legal counsel that we wouldn't be setting that precedent, but then also there's an aspect of should we do that, even if it's not setting a precedent, it's not the necessary policy of the city to do that type of thing. So, but there's another piece of me that we got a leak there. We don't want it to become way worse for our water system. I think we could do it in a day with our public works team, even if we don't include our water department. Should we, kind of solve that now? And we're not going to do anything moving forward, but we're going to fix that in the near term just to, move forward before the ground really freezes. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Do we know how many private roads there are in Ellsworth that have public water?
Any idea on that? Water and wastewater is here, so.
Off the top of my head, I don't.
There's more roads that have water than have wastewater. I know
So, but it's not one or two, it's,
Probably not.
okay. All right, I just wondered, I didn't know how unique of a circumstance this is. I believe you're supposed to come to the microphone. when you-
I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming.
That's happening. Thank you.
Good morning. So I don't know the exact number of private roads that have water and sewer, huh?
More than two, we just came up with four, just sitting here.
Yeah. So the Braid Drive is a unique situation. Just to be super clear, I prefer not to fix that leak, but one side of me prefers not to fix the leak because it is a private road.
Yeah,
And it's not going to be as simple as we would like it to be,
yeah,
because it would involve disturbing pavement, disturbing someone's driveway, dealing with possible outcropping of ledge right there, and a telephone pole right there. On the flip side, and the reason I have advocated points for fixing it is because I would rather, if you were gonna direct me to fix that leak, that we control how and when we fix it, instead of being out there in the middle of January or February trying to fix a leak in freezing cold weather. Because the alternative, if it turns into a bigger leak, which is not something I think is doable, would be to just shut that paint off, which would shut all those houses off.
yeah.
And I can't see us shutting 13 residents off in the middle of the winter.
Yeah, no, that wouldn't be good.
And so, it's the rock and the hard place situation.
Yeah. Do we know, I may have missed it, do we have an estimate of what it would cost
We-
those folks to do it privately?
I don't have an official on-paper estimate. I was told that they were given an estimate of $6,000
To do the whole thing?
to fix it, by a contractor.
Oh, okay, I mean, $6,000 is $6,000, but I live on a private road.
Yeah,
And we pay, every year to do road maintenance.
right.
And we
So the
spend more
question-
than $6,000 on our roads.
So the question becomes, not for me, the question isn't to me about necessarily fixing it. The question to me is, are we billing them? That's the question for me. And that's your call, obviously.
Okay, so it's more of a-
And how are we going to mechanize that? So are we gonna just send everybody on the street a bill for whatever 13th of the money? Or are we going to do a tax?
Do they have to have a homeowners
A
association
supplemental
before
tax?
that we could send it out to?
See, that's the complicated part. And
Sure.
you talked to the attorney, correct? And can you come up here and tell them what the attorney said?
He said we can charge. He said we shouldn't do it if it's an emergency, it's an emergency, and you don't have time to ask them if they want to contribute to fixing it. But we should only step in and do it if it's an emergency and is affecting the larger city-owned. Like, we're only responsible for our city-owned
Right.
water system, according to the attorney.
Yeah, no, that's correct, yeah. There's,
So if you want to be proactive and not wait till it's a crisis, because water leaks never get better. Let's just be clear about that too.
yeah.
And so, yeah,
So if that freezes, it backs, then becomes an emergency and we come in later on to, or big, so do we consider a pre-emergency an emergency?
I mean, in my mind, to me, it's kind of an emergency anyway, not a high-grade emergency, but it's still, you're going into winter, the weather is already proven to be very cold, and the leak at this point is kind of running off into a ditch area, but if it gets worse and it ends up getting out over the street,
Public street or their own private street?
Bray Drive, it's down Bray Drive
Which is
quite a
again
ways.
a private road.
Yeah. Then you have several scenarios that can play out. You can say to yourself, hey, it's been leaking, it's not gonna leak, it get worse in the wintertime, so we're not gonna touch it, and they can try and fix it themselves next year. Or you can go to the other end of the scenario and say, yeah, this thing blows up in January, February, the road's flooded, we have to shut all the houses off, and it's gonna be a miserable, miserable situation.
How long have they known about the leak?
A few months.
Yep.
The lady that bought the house in October is the one that noticed the water. No? Before that?
The real estate agent questioned the seller about it, and the
Okay.
real estate agent notified the water department. The seller told the real estate agent it had been since the summer. It
Okay.
had been there for several months, but she never notified us.
And they don't have like a proper homeowner association, so there's not
Yeah,
like,
my road doesn't either. We
oh,
just-
interesting.
Yeah, we just do it.
Just a collective of.
Yeah, we just kind of, it's informal. It was never formed and it was created.
Okay.
So,
This is why I don't like private subdivisions.
yeah, well, that's why it's good to require potentially, to have covenants that address that. But yeah, so it's kind of, it depends on the road, right? We have a pretty good road where the neighbors know each other and we take collections
Right.
and we deal with it, but not every road's.
I believe they do a collection for their plowing.
Yeah, we do the same. So they have the mechanism. So we don't need to get too much further. This is helpful. I appreciate it.
As chair, I cede the floor to the right
How
honorable
did I
council,
become
the right honorable
so-
councilman, Mr. Allen.
I need a little education about this. I was ripping mad that I thought I missed a workshop. And I'm like, oh my goodness, did I miss a workshop? And I asked Nancy. No, I didn't know anything about it. John didn't know anything about it. And then you clarified that it was a meeting, that the media got involved and so on. But could I just back up a little bit and understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but this was a development that was done that didn't meet the city standards to accept the road.
Correct.
Fair?
Yep. Came
And-
3 times to the council.
Okay. And they didn't meet the standards, so the city wouldn't accept it? Am I right so far? Okay. Does this Bray Drive have sewer and water? Okay. So they have sewer and water, but we don't own the infrastructure, correct?
No, it's not put in correctly. I don't even think it's the right material. Reggie thinks that water line actually may be made out of plastic, which is,
Okay, all right. So, but the city chose to take revenue for water and sewer to go through that pipe.
well, yeah, but that revenue is to pay us to treat and clean that water that comes to us. It's not for the.
And to take this sewer.
No, I understand, but I'm just trying to, the city is cheerfully sending a bill and selling them water and taking their sewer, and these people are paying for it, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, that brings a little different dynamic to it in my mind. And I don't know how many of these go on, but how did we get in that situation? And maybe it happens every day.
Yeah, it does.
Why do they not have private sewer and private water? If we're not, if we don't accept the infrastructure that is there, why do they have the city infrastructure if it wasn't done to a standard?
Because the developer decided he wanted to put public water sewer and he didn't want to put in septics and wells.
And he has that right, if that happened today, we can't fix yesterday.
Right.
But if that happened today, do we create that same problem all over again?
Absolutely.
Is the 150 units is going to be considered private sewer
Well,
and
I'm
water.
trying to get them to go public. But yes, that happens every time. So if you look at it from a developer's perspective, this is what happens, and this is what has always happened, and I'm making an effort to try and change that. But if you're gonna be building a subdivision, the question you have to ask yourself, because you're doing it to make money. The question you
Oh,
have to
yeah.
ask yourself is, if I build a subdivision and I put in a water main and I put in a sewer main and I put the services to each lot, right? I front load all that money and I can charge a little bit more for each lot because it's there. But I front load all the money to put all that infrastructure in. Whereas, if I build a subdivision and then I tell everybody in the subdivision, you're gonna have to put in a well and septic. Oh, by the way, I can actually do that work for you as well. And now you're doing all the lots, you're selling all the lots, and then you're pulling in the business for putting in the septic and the well as well. So for developers, it was more beneficial to them to do subdivisions where they could not put in water and sewer, public water and sewer, and they could put in private. But in this scenario, but the scenario that you run into for other developers is if you're within 200 feet of a public sewer, you're required by state law to tie into that sewer. And so with Bray Drive, whether it was by state law or whether Bobby just wanted to put in the water and sewer, he put it in, and he didn't put it into standard, and so the city wouldn't accept it. And he didn't want to go back and bring it up to standard, so Bray Drive was left as a private. So
Was that to do with roadway or underground infrastructure?
I don't know. I just read in the article that they found Sarah found an article from '91 where he came for the third time to have Bray Drive accepted, and it wasn't accepted. I know part of it was for the road, because at the end of the road, there's a curve, and it doesn't meet the standard for fire trucks and whatnot to get around. But I have yet to be able to find the records that discuss the infrastructure.
So I guess
Can
this
we,
is- oh, go ahead.
if I may finish, so this same scenario could be created tomorrow?
It's been, yeah, no, it's like, so, yes. So if you go down the Shore Road, there's a subdivision, on the other end of the Shore Road, there's a subdivision right there. Our pump station's on the corner. That subdivision's private. They have no public water and sewer there. So I don't.
No,
'cause
that's
they-
not my question. What I'm saying is, all right, so they have private water and sewer.
Yes.
Okay. My question is, can the city continue to get in this situation?
Oh, no, because we have the standards and we enforce the standards. We changed our ordinances.
Okay, so today, if someone was to build this, we can't get in this same situation.
Actually, let me correct that. So if I tell you as a developer, you have to use SDR 35 pipe to put in the sewer, you have to put manholes every 300 feet, that's what it's in our ordinances, same thing with the water, they have to follow the ordinance in the water, and that contract developer decides to tell me, no, I'm not, I'm gonna put it in the way I wanna put it in, and I'm just not gonna have you guys take it over. They can do that.
Okay, and you now have to provide sewer and water to that
Yeah.
residence area, if you will.
They can still
Okay,
tie
So
in.
this same problem can be created tomorrow morning, and we could be experiencing this for the next 100 years.
Exactly. That's why I don't like private development anymore. I'd rather have them be
I'm,
public.
and I know we're here to talk about that issue, but
No, it's
a bigger issue.
It's important. Mike and I talked about this with that 150 unit part, which I
Yeah.
think is going to be on that kind of, their private water and sewer lines that go through all those complexes, and then they tie in as opposed to,
Because it always happens that in that 150 units, is gonna be a perfect example. Line backs up, pump station goes down, the first people they're gonna call is us. And then we're gonna have to say, well, you need to call your management company, because your management company is the one that's responsible for fixing that.
So we're on the hook to provide that infrastructure even though, so can the city of Ellsworth, this is a question, so can the city of Ellsworth take a stance that and I'm not suggesting this, I'm asking this question, can the city of Ellsworth take a stance that, hey, if you're gonna do private water and sewer infrastructure ownership, then provide your own water and sewer.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm kind of along that line where my thought process that I talked to Charlie about was, if you're gonna have over this many dwelling units and you wanna connect to public water and sewer, then you need to make it public and you need to build it to our standards.
Yeah,
I'm asking.
The,
I'm not
there is the other piece on, well, then, if you're, you gotta make your own water and sewer out there, and you gotta figure it out, so we don't have to mess with those systems at all in perpetuity. The problem with that is there's
yeah.
laws on, if you're within a certain amount of feet away from a public water and sewer, you have to. And then there's a second piece, which I don't think you'd want to establish that precedent over time, because you want as many ratepayers in the system as possible, or else you get a situation like I'm in Castine, where we only have public water sewer on the neck. Nobody's allowed to do their own wells and everything else, because even this small amount of ratepayers themselves is just a wildly expensive water and sewer system. So for the whole rate-paying system in Ellsworth, we want more and more people to keep tying in. We're about to build a $12 million new water treatment plant, in order in many ways to kind of make that cost effective. We're gonna need more customers and growth, and if we allow private developers to really not tie into our systems, even though they're close by, that would hurt the overall economics of the system.
Yeah, and one thing I would like to point out that Amanda just brought to my attention also is part of probably the reasoning that Bobby Ray did what he did with Bray Drive is because his lots are very small, and so they may not have had the footage they needed to be able to put in a well and a septic. I don't know if they had enough land to put one in on each lot. So that may have driven it to putting in.
Well, yeah, we can't
Right.
figure out why it happened. I'm just wondering if we're on the hook for this problem to continue
Well,
forward.
I think, Steve, that line of questioning is really helpful, and I think it helps me kind of wrap my head around this Bray Drive situation. If you choose not to build, to the standards of public water and sewer, you can still connect to our public water and sewer, but if you don't build to those standards, then you are on the hook for any fixes that is anything that is not public water and sewer. And, it's the same but I would ask the question here, if it is built to public water and sewer, but it's only built to the street, and then from the street to your house,
The street to the house is the homeowner's.
is the
Yeah.
homeowners, right? So this is basically just longer. This is the
Yeah.
street, this is the house to the street. They're on the hook for that. The same with my power lines, right? Like, my power lines go, the road, the power company takes care of it, but from the road to my house is on me. So I think it's the same situation. And for me, this all says, Bray Drive is private, they chose to do so. It's really on them, under the way we're set up. But the question, as I understand it, is, but because it may cause an emergency, should the city step in? That's where we're at.
Yeah, that and the fact that they can't go back to the developer, right? He
Yeah,
passed away,
yeah,
so their mechanism for saying to the developer, hey, you have to go good for this because you chose not to go.
Yeah,
build
no, I
it."
get that. And so in my mind, unless it's an emergency and we really need to step in because it's going to compromise our public water and sewer, unless it's that, in my opinion, it's on Bray Drive and those folks to fix it.
Okay, so I just so we're super clear here. So we understand.
Again, this isn't a vote. This is
Yeah.
Yeah, I might talk to council at the January meeting. I know it's kind of arcane, but there's some other tie-ins on future and stuff too, and, yep.
Just so we're super clear though. If it becomes an emergency situation, we step in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
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 That it seems.
Yeah, I think that's why we're
That's all.
here, and then they get billed for it.
Okay.
Yeah. But unless
good.
it's short of an emergency, in my opinion,
Yeah.
just one of 7
Yeah, I know.
counselors, that's on them. And that's just the way it works, and that's how it works for my street.
Yeah. No, I just want to be able to react and have certainty that I'm making the right call if that line blows and water's spewing everywhere.
I think the real issue,
We're going.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Okay.
I think the real issue here is, the homeowners had a perception that if it's on city sewer and water, that they don't have anything beyond that. And here we are taking their money
Yep.
and they want some help. And it changes hands 3 times over the last 25 years. And everybody sees sewer and water, and here we are.
And from their perspective too, there's been previous public works directors that have, according to them, have come out and fixed this issue for them. They just kind of solve it off the books, go out there and do it like they did it before. Isn't that a precedent to do it now? And for there's a strong impetus of me where I don't have to have these conversations. I didn't have to have those meetings. And I just send Mike and just do it. But we can't because of the precedent. I do feel for these folks, to your point, Steve, on, that was my kind of assumption coming in. And then you talk just like, oh, it's just the treatment. This is essentially the equivalent of a private faucet breaking in your home. Like, we can't have Public Works come out to that. Well, that private faucet goes all the way out to the street. And there's some point where there's like a joint ownership of the private faucet. And, when you buy your house, there's a lot of fine print, but that aspect of it, I can really feel for this group of people. They, and the way it was built, and that's a beautiful street, and it's right near the city, and it's on town city and water. So this is a complicated one.
And to further that a little bit, I think that there is some accountability if the city chooses to sell you your infrastructure, your water and your sewer. It's fair that there's an expectation there, and I get the confusion, and I think there should be some real clarity over this issue going forward. And perhaps the solution to the problem is, okay, the city hasn't done this right. We're selling you the product. We're taking the product. You're paying us to do it. Perhaps maybe a solution to the problem would be, there's been precedent set, there hasn't, here's the city's stance. I'm not suggesting this, I'm floating an idea, okay? Maybe the stance is, okay, we are gonna take care of this problem because there's some gray area here and there is non-clarity here. But moving forward, we're not ever gonna help this problem. And beyond that, apparently these people have known that they're paying for plowing and sanding, so there had to
We don't
be.
plow it. We don't plow it.
No, they pay, that's what you're saying.
They pay for it, yeah.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Yep, that's what Steve was saying.
The city is plowing and sanding that?
No.
They are not. And the city, and someone else is
It's
plowing
a
and
private
sanding.
road.
Private, it's just like my road.
I understood it that the city was plowing it and billing them.
No, they actually got upset when we actually plowed it by mistake one year.
It was a new driver, I guess, and he didn't
Okay.
know.
My point is this, is that I think the city needs to be fair, and I think the city needs to be clear going forward. And how do we prevent getting into these situations over the next 20 years?
Yep. And saving future city managers this time in some way. I mean, on that note, Tim King, the former city manager of Ellsworth from 1990 to 2003, when he saw the article, he reached out, and he said that it was never accepted as a public way because it wasn't properly constructed, including appropriate right-of-ways, et cetera. Underground utilities responsibility, and his conclusion then was it's the responsibility for road utility maintenance was on the residents of Bray. And as we discussed with the residents of Bray as well, I think and other folks have done with private ways, if there is still an option to make it a public way, you would have a special tax assessment, an analysis of their system to bring it to city standards, a tax assessment over a period of 20 years. The city would go out to bond for it, but then the service on the bond would come from the an additional tax assessment on the resident property owners, and then the city basically holds that as a public way in perpetuity moving forward. The residents didn't seem too interested in that route, but that is in some ways like that's the final solution if if the city, or to your point, Steve, it's we can't do it, this is private for these reasons, but this is the very clear aspect on it. But again, these houses will change hands, and also to your point too, like moving forward with our own code and how we do this. I think our standards, even in the development stages, are probably a little better than they were back then, so we hopefully avoid this, but there still is this thing on the books where, these apartment complexes get built, and, that could be an issue 20, 30 years down the line where it becomes less clear of how we fix it too. So I think I'll probably add this to the January, just even this back and forth exchange, once we have some final determination on the abandoned roadway aspect and our full options set. I feel for these folks too. I'm kind of in Patrick's area as well. There's a little bit of me that just wants to solve this one piece, but not establish the precedent, and be very clear, like, this is it. And from this point forward, it's public way to have us do it, or the homeowners' responsibilities. It's not, or if it becomes a real emergency, the city's gonna fix it, and then we're gonna bill everybody on the street for it too.
There's a piece of me that has a heart in this, that we're taking their tax money, we're taking their water money, we're taking their sewer money, and there is a presumption there that there is some support behind that. And so the clarity going forward is important, making sure we don't continue to make this type of infrastructure mistakes, I think is important. But there's a chance for the city to be fair and clear going forward, I believe.
And just on that point, Steve, I think you say we're taking the money. I view it as we're providing them a service, right? Like, I have a private well and a private septic. I have to pay money to have that septic pumped every so many years. My well, I have to treat it if it's, if there's any issues with it, or I run the risk of it, drying up and all that. So I just want to, yes, they are paying the city, but we're providing them a service that otherwise they're paying for out of pocket. I would love to have city water and sewer on my property, even if it meant I'm on the hook for certain infrastructure. So I just, that's how I see this.
And could I just comment on that?
Yeah, of course.
You knew going forward that you're privatized, that it's your septic and your water, okay? No guesswork. When someone is paying for city water and city sewer, there comes a perception that there's some support behind that. Now, in my case, I'm totally private, as you, okay? It's very clear to me that the city has no responsibility for my infrastructure on my property. And most people that pay water and sewer expect some backup service, okay, because they're paying monthly. We paid up front, okay, at the purchase of your home. They're paying monthly. So there's a perception that there is some support that goes with paying for that service, okay? In our case, there was none of that perception. We knew that private is private. And if public is public, that's clear. But these people are falling into a gray area. And we need to clear up that gray area beyond today, however that may be, because you knew going in that there was no help for you. I knew that. These people may not have known that. And responsibility follows the money trail, okay? So there's a gray area there, and I agree with all of these situations, but the clarifying the gray area going forward, I think, is very important.
Yeah.
If there's private sewer and water that we're taking money for, perhaps a letter going out to these people for clarity would be great, because it's clear to you and I, as a private guy, that you're gonna pay for your sewer and your water. But when somebody moves to your town of Ellsworth and pays for public infrastructure, there's an expectation that there's public support, because the responsibility follows the dollar. Much like if you buy a tire at a tire shop and you're completely displeased with the tire, we have an expectation that the person we gave the money to is going to listen to us and perhaps solve our problem. And when that person says, "Oh, I didn't make the tire, you bought the tire, you gave me a margin for it, but that's your problem," okay? That leaves that little bit of bitter, sour taste, and I think clarifying that up front is probably a good thing.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad to hear this conversation and the extent of it too, because I think I talked to some folks originally, and it seemed like this is a pretty straightforward, like, letter of the law problem. You know, you can take it as a public roadway, and here's the process, or not, even though there's a lot of gray in between. And I met with many of the homeowners once on this, just me personally, and then brought in our public works team and our planner. And we did send a letter to Steve, to the whole neighborhood as well. And we had another meeting to kind of flesh it out further, surface the idea of an abandoned road because the developer left. And like to your point, the uniqueness, you buy that house, you're so close, you're on city water, city sewer. Yes, you're paying for the plowing and these other things. So, but if, you know, I'm on water, sewer in Castine. If I, all of a sudden there was a break in the middle of the road and they're like, actually, in your sub-clause of your deed, you technically own this piece with these other people that you don't have a homeowner association, I'd be just, you know, what? Like, how much is it? And so it would be a surprise. And I do feel like trying to put myself in their shoes, like, you know, I don't think this is unreasonable. And then you look at the history of the city, they fixed it in the past, they allowed this development to go forward in this way in the first place. So there's a lot of gray. But then there's the precedent aspect of, you know, how many of these exist. And if this is it, then everybody else is going to come. And then the water sewer department are just on a massive repair campaign because this is like a new activity of the city that could be very expensive. So there's
Clarity. Clarity. Every situation like Gray Drive should be notified
Yep.
to clear up this.
That could be good.
And
Yeah.
every home has its own service line, so every home already has a piece that they're responsible for. The city is responsible for the city-owned main, and when you have a pipe from your home to that connection, you're responsible for that. So if the leak was in your front yard on your service line, that's the homeowner's responsibility.
Even if you're not on a private.
Yeah, I think,
I get
to
that.
Steve's point, there are, like you said, there are these private roads
Yep.
that have private infrastructure, not just on the individual property, but on the road itself. And these, you know, it's probably not that many, so maybe we identify which ones those are, and we let everyone know, hey, here's the deal.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that popped into my head when you guys were talking about that is what we can do, also look at doing is when they come to set up their account, if they're on a private road, we can just include
Yeah.
a letter or
Automatic
something.
notice.
Oh, yeah, I like
Notice
that.
idea.
Notice everyone
Great
now
idea.
once,
Yeah.
and then set
Yeah.
up a standard.
Yeah,
that we
great
come in.
idea.
Yeah, so I think
We
we can do
solved
that.
all the world's problems.
Look at that. And all it's a-
I think we can do that, but I also think I will be coming to the council to look at doing an ordinance change for development. I mean, we'll have more conversation about it, obviously, but
Yeah.
I just think if you're gonna be building in Ellsworth over a certain number of dwelling units, you can't be private. If you're gonna be on the city's water and sewer, then, and you're over a certain number of dwelling units, this is my thought process, then you don't have the option to say, we're not gonna have the city take it over. You will have the city take it over, and then we
We'll go
can,
private.
yeah, or you can put in septic and wells, but you're not going to just,
That would stop my concern going forward.
Yeah.
You know, 20 years from
and
now.
that's my,
When
that's
we're
my
all
thought.
out of here. and-
Right.
and-
Yeah. As much as I want to kick this to another city manager in 20 years and we just let development go, like, that's just, but yeah, we really.
Yeah, so that's my thought process on solving the problem.
I think I'll bring it to the council meeting for a discussion. I'll have probably an action set. I'll notify the Brave folks that we'll do that. And I really like that idea of the utility bill itself. That could be a,
Yeah, yeah.
even more clear solution so that when it hits, it's like, you know, it's not just on a sub-clause in your area. And then we'll get an inventory of how often this exists too. Okay, that was
All right,
it.
so
There was a little bit of out of orderness between not acknowledging the chair, but I'll let that slide this time around.
Get the gavels.
All right, so walking away from this, if something happens before the January council meeting,
If it's an emergency.
I'm doing it.
Yeah, if it's an emergency, we gotta do it, and we'd likely have to bill for it, but I've talked to council on it. So. Great, did we want to hear from some citizens? Or- yeah. Citizen comment?
It is finance related.
Finance related. I think this one is, yep.
Morning. Stephen and Elaine Pickering. Since August, we've been trying to figure out how we get horse warning signs on our stretch of the road. Talked to you, talked to the council, talked to Mike. We've done all the things they asked us to do. The last thing I knew, the guy in Bangor, DOT, was going to get back to Mike. We've since left Mike a few messages, tried to use his email, but that doesn't work. Just trying to figure out what's happening with the signs. When we first asked this question, we were told that it wasn't going to happen because it would set an untenable precedent to help just one taxpayer. And even though my letter mentioned other riders. So that really doesn't fly. But the real downside of all this is nobody gets back to us to let us know what's going on. Either you will or you won't, and don't even know that. So we're here to find out where we stand.
Yeah, I'll follow up with Mike after this, but where we stood last time, I think as I mentioned, I did talk to the finance committee meeting about it, and that I don't think I was here the second time when you all came back, but that, you know, if you all were willing to pay for the sign, that we would put it up, and I think we've talked to DOT that they'll put it up, but that's.
So if I want to put up 30-mile-an-hour speed limit signs, I can do that too?
No, but that we're okay with a sign of this type, but that the whole taxpayers shouldn't necessarily have to pay for that sign, and that it doesn't rise to that level. The speed limit signs, those posting are a general public need. This one seems more specific to you all. That's what the city council, when we discussed this in the finance committee meeting, that's what the city councilors had noted, that they would be okay with the sign, but they felt that it should be on the.
But that was when you were under the impression it was only one person asking.
I'm Patrick Lyons. Thank you for coming and bringing this to us. Yeah, again, it's because it's not a, standard regulation, road signage. It's unique to that circumstance. The council determined we'd be happy to help put the sign up, but just it'd be the cost of the folks that want the sign to be put up to pay for the sign.
So any public safety issue, that's the stance, or just this?
Not
I think
any.
No, I think we're trying to be accommodating. I mean, we could just say, this is not a standard sign and put nothing up, but we're trying to be accommodating to have that sign put up, and we're happy to do the work as long as you folks pay for the sign.
Well, the last thing that Mike said was,
Ma'am.
if Charlie says
Ma'am.
put up the sign, we'll put up the sign.
Could you please wait? I need to talk to you.
The last thing Mike said, if Charlie says put up the sign, we'll put up the sign. And nobody's gotten back to us.
Mike, you're.
Mike, can you come to the microphone, please?
So we referred them to the state. The state came back, and the state said the exact same thing, that the state won't put up the sign, and even if they were willing, they wouldn't put up the sign unless they paid for it. It's the same exact, and they actually sent me their policy on signs, which I am looking to institute with the city, but it hasn't come to the council yet.
But at the moment, it's at our discretion.
But we've just been trying to get a yes or no since August.
Yeah, Steve, you might have something changed, but my answer then and talking to council is if you all would like to pay for the sign, then we would move forward with putting it up. We don't necessarily have a problem with the sign, but in discretionary signage like this, every case is unique. There could be a different type of sign like this that's discretionary that I would say no to, regardless of if the taxpayer wanted to pay for the sign. But with something like this, but happy to hear Steve out and not necessarily have that opinion and have it changed.
I just want to remind, and I would encourage everybody to go back to the Finance Committee meeting to check my memory. But the one and only time I have ever had a conversation, with the exception of Monday morning, with you, is this. These people come, they came before this board, this committee, what have you. And the chair of our city council sat in that one of these seat and said, this needs to go back to Charlie. Okay? And I would encourage everybody to watch that meeting, okay? Because I distinctly remember hearing our chair say, this needs to go back to Charlie. And I distinctly remember telling these people that I don't believe that a sign is gonna change driver behavior. And in the beginning, I understood my mistake, that they were willing to pay for the sign and the city was willing to put it up. Mrs. Pickering clearly said from the podium that we don't want to pay for the sign, we pay our taxes. And regardless, it was said that it needed to go back to Charlie. I had a meeting with you on Monday about a different subject, and I'm like, did those people, I don't even know their names, I wasn't smart enough. I got a number from her from the state to find out about the signs, and I called the state, found out, you know, the whole process that anybody can put up a sign. I had to buy myself 4 trucks entering signs as a condition of an entrance, and I was allowed to put them up, but it was a condition of an entrance, and I was happy to do it. And it was less than $400 for 4 signs. So I think there's a couple of problems here. Number one is you weren't here when they were here, okay? And that's fine. And our chair said this needs to go back to Charlie, and it hasn't gone back to Charlie yet, okay? And that's where these people were left, is my recollection. Now, fast forward this to today, now it's back to Charlie. And Charlie's position is that it sets a precedent, okay?
Well,
Let me finish. Okay. So I just want to weigh in as a member of this committee and as a member of the city council. I don't remember it ever going to the city council, but maybe you talk to councilors individually about it or something. I don't remember it going to city council. Have you been before the city council on this issue? I didn't
No.
think so. So, secondly, I get your position on setting precedent. You can't put up horse signs for everybody that wants a horse sign, okay? I understand that. However, I believe the city spent $5,000 on the sign on Copper Newberry's, okay? If that's not a precedent, I don't know what is. I wasn't in disagreement with that, but $5,000 of the taxpayers' money went on that sign on Newberry's. And I'm dating myself. What is it now? The Blue Moon, Black Moon, or whatever it is.
Blackman.
The Tracy Building. How's that? So, much like the Bray Drive situation, there's nothing wrong with treating Mr. and Mrs. Ellsworth with a little bit of service and respect. I agree, it's $170 for these 2 signs. Is that fair? It's less than $200, okay? I disagree that this sign is going to do anything to behavior, but that's not the point here. The point is this. Mr. and Mrs. Ellsworth, or Mr. and Mrs. Pickering, is here asking for a little support from their tax dollars. And I don't think it kills the city of Ellsworth to support the people that are supporting the city of Ellsworth. And we have general assistants knocking on the back door, getting free things that don't even live here. So what's the harm in helping somebody that lives here and contributes over $170? That's my position.
Just for the record, that's my position too.
And just for the record, it would be nice to have someone get back. We've left so many messages, and he
No,
never
you haven't.
returns our call.
I'm not gonna dispute it with you, but no, you haven't.
I have a quick
You sent one
question.
yesterday?
Yep.
Off of what Steve
I
just
called you
said.
yesterday and left a
No,
message.
So,
it was the other day.
Day before yesterday.
Yeah.
Because I don't have it.
when the signs don't work,
We've left more than one.
I've rode
You can argue all you
horses, my
want.
uncle
I know
has a
I
horse
can.
farm.
Right.
When the signs don't work, what happens
So are you.
next? Are they gonna come back
Watch
after
it,
we
bud.
spend the $200? Are they gonna come back asking for more? Because now we have set a precedence on getting the signs. Are they gonna come back and ask for more? Like, now the signs aren't working. What else can we do? That's my other question. It's like, what other doors is that gonna open up?
Well, my question or response to that is, let's give success a chance in satisfying a taxpayer for $170. I don't think it's gonna work either. But Mr. and Mrs. Ellsworth send City Hall quite a bit of money. And I realize your concerns about, oh my goodness, if we give everybody $170, but every business has to go through that. Sometimes they have to solve a problem for a particular customer, to keep goodwill. And the city gave $5,000 for that sign.
Yeah, and I, just to weigh in on that piece, I personally like the sign.
I do too.
I think it's great. I don't know if I would have, but I also would have come to this process for it. When that sign came to me as the city's, I actually saw it in a news article that this city was contributing $5,000 for it. I was like, I never talked to anybody about that. And then
Me neither.
I talked to the folks that were setting it up, and there was email exchange with the previous city manager, agreeing to pay for the $5,000, and actually came to a finance committee meeting just like this and said, what do we do here?
Whoa, 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 whoa. Show me that tape.
I could show you. You might not have been at the meeting, but you probably were. And I mentioned that I saw an email from $5,000 that, how do you want me to handle this?
Yeah, there was a meeting on it, yeah.
So I came to finance committee meeting. I said, because for me it doesn't matter if it's $4. I have authority to spend up to $15,000, without coming to council. But whether I spend $4 or $14,400, if it wasn't in the budget, I come to this finance committee meeting, I talk about it, sometimes I come to the other meetings, because to me, transparency is super important, if I'm going off book. That we-
That's on video.
Yeah, it's on Pat-
I believe,
Yeah.
yeah, I recall.
I can't
that.
wait to see it.
It was
I've
definitely-
been to a lot of these and watched a lot of, and
You might not have been at the.
I didn't know anything about it.
You might not have been at the meeting. Again, you are right, Steve. I actually could, hypothetically, I could have 15 signs out there and just keep giving $5,000 sign, but I wouldn't do that. I would always bring it to city council, and I don't establish that as a precedent for me, funding things in this way. I'm always going to talk to council, which is why, and your point is well taken, and I apologize for the customer service staffu here. I take ownership of that. I should have followed up with the team to make sure this was off of our checklist. It has been, we probably talked about it at 3 or 4 Public Works meetings. In addition to when it was first brought to me, I said my personal opinion was that we shouldn't pay for it, but I brought it to city council. I think there's even a pre-meeting to what you're talking about, Steve, where I came to city council, I asked the councilors how they felt about this, and it was pretty much unanimous. I can't remember if you were in that meeting or not, that we would be okay with it in principle. However, it should fall on the person wanting to put it up. So that seemed to be the will of the finance committee at that time. We let them know. I think they didn't agree with that. And there also at that time there was I assumed it was just these folks, one group of people that had the horses, and they came and I met with them personally in my office, and they said it actually just wasn't just one. There's 7 people that have horses, and I said, I thought about it in my office as well, and I'd say I still think this precedent holds here, that that if you'd like to pay for the sign, that you're absolutely, but I also let them know that we meet at finance committee every, 8 AM, and if they disagree with that decision, I'm happy to, please talk to the city councilors about it, and if the city council, really feels that the city should be paying money for this sign, whether it's a $175 sign or a $1,700 sign, I'm happy to consider that and move in a different direction. As you mentioned, Steve, I wasn't at that meeting, and I don't think the loop was.
They were left in the dark, because Michelle said, this needs to go back to Charlie. And you wasn't there, that's fair. but it didn't get back to.
Yeah,
Chad.
so the customer,
Now it's in front of
the
Chad.
the customer service thing, I 100% take ownership of, and again, I wasn't at that meeting to close that loop, but it still seemed like the city council's will on this was that we're not gonna pay for the private sign, that, you know, if there's a, or not private sign, but to put up a sign of this nature at city expense, like essentially that my position and the council's position hasn't changed. The finalization of that, and I feel like we could do that here, but if you, that seems to be where I'm still at, is that if you all would like to pay for the sign, or the 7 people that utilize this area feel a sign in that public access would be very important for safety. As Steve has mentioned, he doesn't think it's actually going to solve it. I think most of the council, and we already have done a paid Facebook post on this as well, to let people know about horses and roadways, but that's still where I'm at.
And I agree with you, Charlie, and I support that.
When I see a deer crossing sign, it makes me more aware. And I think that would be the norm,
Who pays for those?
State of
not
Maine.
me. And there's 7 horses in this one little area. And if one of them was to get out, at least they're cautious that there could be a horse in the road. If you had 7 deer crossing the road on a daily basis, you'd have a deer sign there.
I hear everything you're saying. The city is more than happy to provide the services of installing the sign if you're willing to pay for it.
Thank you for listening to us.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Is there somebody else in City Ellsworth last name Harris?
Not that I'm aware of.
That's the phone system puts us to you. And she left at least one message yesterday, and we left several before.
And
And
I
we've tried to,
will go- I
we've tried to
will-
use your email, and that bumps us back.
I will go check the voicemails, but I checked my voicemails yesterday multiple times, and I didn't have any, so maybe there's a technical glitch somewhere, because
It just, sorry to interrupt, I think this, if you guys could take the conversation
Yep.
offline.
Yeah, sure.
That'd be helpful.
I would like to interrupt, if I may. Could we leave this gentleman, if he chooses to buy the sign, who does he contact to get them installed that you had
He
shipped off?
he can contact me.
What's
or-
your phone number?
664-4404.
Can I write that down for you? Or do you
Please.
have it?
No.
No, if the signs are provided, we'll go out there and put them on.
What's the number again?
664-4404.
4404. Is that an office or a cell?
No, that's myself.
That's
My
a
person.
cell. Okay, so the communications can get better if you decide to
Thank you for coming, sir.
buy the
I apologize
signs.
for thank you for coming, and I apologize for the communications, Stephanie, that's on me.
So if you decide, you heard from the city that if you buy them, they'll put them up. That's what I'm hearing here.
Yep, we're
Yep.
happy to do it.
So that includes post hardware sign? or just-
Signs come with posts and hardware if you buy them from a DOT-approved site. The closest one to us is White Signs in Stillwater.
And I,
That's what DOT told me when I called the last time you were here. That's where I bought mine. I was told by the state that if I went to White Signs, they would sell me what I needed, and they did.
Okay.
and if it's a DOT-approved sign, and for some reason that doesn't come with, like, we'll figure out the posting, I promise you that, sir.
It comes with it.
If it comes with it, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it. Oh,
How's it going?
good.
So, I'd like to talk about the parking standards. for
Okay,
our-
sorry, sir, your name?
My name's Jared from
Okay.
Union River Associates, also a resident in Ellsworth.
Okay, great.
So, as far as parking standards go, a business needs 1 parking spot per employee. If you're doing a restaurant, you need a half a parking spot per customer that's coming in.
Yep.
So obviously, there is districts in downtown A, B, and C. They, with their land, cannot fulfill the needs for the parking. Therefore, there is city parking that I'm assuming the city takes care of. So we are looking to purchase a new loader. I'm assuming either the new loader or the old loader are gonna probably be removing snow out of the parking lots like years past. So my question is, if you have to abide by this ordinance as a commercial entity, and you have all the spots, and you have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to remove, to salt, to treat, are these businesses downtown? Are they, their taxes are the same as everybody else? So in theory, other people further around town are subsidizing the parking for downtown. And I understand that Main Street doesn't want to put in meters because it's going to hurt their business. So my question would be, why couldn't the city go to these businesses and sell employee parking passes to offset the cost of the loader, the salt, and the additional maintenance to these parking areas that are used to fulfill the needs for them to get their COs?
Well, I have two things on that. One is,
Could you define CO?
Certification of occupancy.
Okay,
which says
thank you. I'm
meet
sorry. I didn't know what that
Parking
meant.
standards, getting signed off on your sewer and water, code walks through and says you're
sorry,
okay.
no
I
worries,
didn't
Steve.
know.
No, it was a good clarification, and yeah, it's oftentimes in this job, part of the difficult part is you're rocking a hard place, and it's on the one hand, on the other, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. There's, as you've probably seen with the parking kiosk, there's no decision yet. I just want to make sure that this is not that venue. We are looking into that as like the high cost of free parking, right? I know that was one of the pieces is, that this infrastructure is maintained by the city, but that we get a lot of benefit out of that with our downtown and parking for folks, but there is a cost for plowing, for maintenance, for repair and whatnot. So that piece. The other piece of it, it's funny you mentioned that on the parking size and the requirements for the areas. I know it was in our comp plan, the comp plan on on a regulation change, potentially. I think it was specifically mentioned on that one, on parking size, or at least reviewing it. Maybe it was in the housing one. But it does seem, it's on my list, I have called developer notes when I speak to developers and others on just, do we really need this? A lot of it's just empty parking. So you're looking at an asset that you're maintaining, you're taking care of, and you're never seeing it full like it's 1985 at a mall on Christmas Day. That's not, the asset could be used maybe for other purposes, but we have these regulations on the books. So that's when there's a bunch of things in the comp plan and the housing piece that are kind of, I call it like the skinny ordinance change, maybe to talk to the planning board on, hey, what are the things that developers have noted, others have noted, that we could change, and I'd love to have you as part of that conversation if we do make a change there, and maybe a future planning board meeting that, what's the right size of parking requirements for lots for these areas so that business owners aren't having to take care of too much. We also mentioned here in changing the water sewer, on how that private ties in. That's part of my notes, that it says parking space ordinance. I know height limits was another thing that might be wanting to be looked into, especially in the High Street corridor. That could be not helping development or pushing away development if we could have different height limits out there as well. So there's a few areas on that piece that, like I said, oftentimes I'm kind of, but I agree with just about everything you said there.
Well, because what I look at is you take just the employees alone through this downtown district that's paying the same amount of money on taxes as everybody else. There's enough employees here that in 10 years would offset the cost of this loader that they're using. So if you take my slice of the pie and put it, I'm not getting any out of it. Mr. and Mrs. Green Lake, who mail their taxes, that never come to City Hall, they're not getting, but these people down here are reaping the benefits of that. So I feel like they should be paying kind of their pro rata share, maybe not in meters, but I believe in like a parking pass, a yearly parking pass per employee. I'm not saying huge amounts of money, but if you take the 150 people and you sell them that thing, hey, even if it covers the oil changes in the fuel for that loader, that doesn't pay for the dump truck that's hauling off the snow, but just for the loader, that's gonna add up over time.
Yeah, and it's interesting, it's, whether we move forward parking kiosks as a pilot or as not at all, this has been an interesting process to think about our public infrastructure like that, to really actually dial in how many spaces we have, how many are being used for employees, how many employees are potentially parking on Main Street right now, right? Or, hopefully not many, but we don't really have, we're not doing enforcement on these hours and these other pieces. And what is the cost? So it's not just, I know, Steve, you've talked a lot about that, the cost just kind of, we have a cost for our sewer, we don't pay sewer from the city. That doesn't mean there's no cost to the sewer. And we need to make sure that these costs are, regardless of how we pay for them, but they're apparent. And we know where they're at as opposed to sort of ignoring that they're actually costs. So I very, very much take those points there.
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing this to our attention.
It's all about fairness, and I love what you're saying. I think the problem exists from previous times, when people bought a building downtown. They bought what they thought was no parking lot to plow, no infrastructure cost, because they paid for that property and the city was going to maintain the street and the parking lot and et cetera. But looking forward, is that really what we should be doing? You know, that's the question. And probably when J.J. Newberry Building or Tracy Building was sold, one of the attractions in buying that is that they have no parking maintenance cost, and that's probably why the building sells for an escalated amount, and that comes back in taxes, because a building on Main Street, building for building, always brings more
Yeah.
than the building that's not on Main Street.
Although not to complicate it too much, but in the defense of those folks and maybe even that aspect is, especially in researching this too, like the fear with adding kiosks and other things is that, we kind of slide back on having almost full occupancy in our Main Street, and that wasn't the case, I think, 10 years ago, at least looking at the, some of the research that I've done into that, there was a time when, and having a full Main Street is, not just for the business owners, but to the community at large is an enormously helpful thing. When you have people driving through your main streets and it's not, they're not business owners in there and you're saying vacant for sale, it is a bad impression for a city. So I wouldn't want to, 10 years ago, if there was a lot of vacancy in the main street, I wouldn't necessarily want to make it harder or more expensive to be there. Now that it's a fuller Main Street, now we're thinking of kiosks, but with that push, so that there is some edges on this one that I think are all important, to keep in mind, and as we consider the cost of that, and or the not cost for the business owners that are here, and how important Main Streets are to the
I think
city.
all these conversations are about balance and fairness in my mind.
So, like you said, Main Street's almost fully occupied, and if it's the place to be and it's flipping over, then why don't we take the impact fee and put it all over Ellsworth and not just from Cardsbrook up? I mean, if you had to take a place up on Cardsbrook, and then you figure in your impact fee and the hooking into the water and this and that, I mean, you're gonna try to find something downtown. So then, what you're doing is it's not quite fair going one side of a brook to another. So if it's so profitable and it's coming up, why aren't we spreading that impact fee everywhere and getting those tax dollars to offset a vac truck and a loader and stuff that we need to make this city more viable?
Yeah.
How about eliminating them everywhere?
That would work too. You would
Instead of
probably see a lot more growth in some of these big developments. I mean, the water and sewer ends at Martin's. There is prime commercial real estate right there on Route 3 that would be developed if, anyways.
No, these are all really good, and and it's part of that housing plan as well, is to have the city try to build more water sewer line so that more customers can tap into the system and make it cheaper for developers to develop. That's in black and white on our housing task force plan that we discussed at the last council meeting, and even this conversation itself. It's, do we keep the maintenance for all this free parking here, on the city and all the taxpayers? And do we require these larger lot sizes out there on High Street? That could be relooked at. The impact fees are all great stuff, but I do have a meeting to attend to.
I'm already late for mine, but it was fun.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you very much.